This video is the instructions for the Hackysack or beanbag that we are making in class. I have the instructions listed step by step on the slideshow that's going to be on Google Classroom. This is an example of what the Hackysack or beanbag could look like. I used different fabric for this, obviously, but this is kind of the shape or what it will look like at the very end. So the first step that you are going to do is you're going to take it's almost like a triangle, but rounded off. It's going to be like a triangle stencil. So you need to cut 4 pieces of fabric using this triangle stencil. So they should all be the same shape. And what you need to do is you need to, on the wrong side, meaning like the inside of the fabric, you are going to draw a 1/4 inch border along the fabric. So you can see that I've done it on my fabric as well using a black marker. This is going to show you exactly where you need to be sewing on your piece. So you also need to pin together all 4 pieces. So they roughly make the shape of the beanbag. So the stitch that we're going to be doing is called a whip stitch. So the thing about the whip stitch is that you only insert the needle on one side of the fabric. So you'll always be threading the needle through one side and then pulling the thread through on the other. So you can see that I've started already whip stitching the fabric together. So when you whip stitch, your thread will go over the edge of the fabric. So it kind of looks like I have these lines that are threaded over the fabric. So you can see that I have my thread pulled through one side, and then the other side, so this side right here, is where I'm threading through the needle. The point of us drawing those 1/4 inch lines on the fabric is so that we know how far in to the fabric we should be piercing the needle through. You can also see that I have the thread spaced out evenly. So each stitch is about the same space apart. So I'm just threading the needle through where I've drawn that line, and then I'm pulling it out on the other side. The point of the pins is just to keep the fabric from shifting around. Once you have started stitching and you've passed that area, where the needle is, you can pull the needle, or the pin, you can pull the pin out of the fabric. It's only meant to hold the fabric in place while you're stitching. The other important thing that you need to know when it comes to the whip stitch is the thread that you pull through, it should be on the left side of the needle. So you can see when I'm threading the needle through this side, I'm going to make sure when I'm pulling it through on the other side that my needle is not caught, the needle with the thread is not caught on the left side. I'm keeping that extra thread to the left, and then I'm pulling it through. Because you don't want to make little X's. You should not see an X with your thread. It should just be little kind of angled lines. So, like I mentioned, once you have passed the point where the pin is, clipping or pinching the fabric together, you can pull it out. You don't need it once you have passed it with your stitches. So I'm just going to continue doing the whip stitches. You really want to focus on making them the same distance or length apart. And another thing, you want to kind of tug on the stitching, or sorry, the thread to make sure that it's pulled tight at the very end, because when you go to fill your hacky sack or beanbag at the end, you are going to flip the fabric right side in so that the pattern is on the outside. But if your stitches are not pulled tight enough, you're going to be able to see the thread, and you know, there's a chance that it could come undone, or it's just, you know, you're going to see it. It may not look as clean. So you really want to make sure that you're pulling it a little bit tight, not so much that the fabric is like really wrinkled, but you want to make sure that it's tight. So I'm going to keep going with the whip stitches until I hit the very corner of the fabric, so the end of one side. If you run out of thread, further along in this video, I go over how to tie off. I will also show you guys in person how to tie off the thread. So if you run out, that's fine. You can also come to me if you need me to show you in person. I can show you it again. But I'm just continuing with the whip stitches until I get to the corner where I'm gonna start whip stitching onto the other side. So once you hit the corner, you're gonna start on another side. The thing is you need to make sure that you're pretty much threading the needle through only on one side of the fabric again. So the way that I was kind of thinking of it was like the side that was like away from me is where I was threading the needle through, and then the side closest to me was where I was like pulling the thread, so like where it was coming out of. So I decided for like that back side, or like I guess the left for you guys in the camera or like viewing this video, that's where I was going to thread the needle through. So I'm starting once again at the very top of the fabric, so where the pen or like the marker first starts in that little corner, and I'm just double checking to make sure that that I'm going through where, you know, the pen is marked. You don't want to stitch super close to the end of the fabric, because there's a chance that your stitches could rip, like the piece, like your beanbag could like fall apart. But you don't want to stitch too far into the fabric, because then your hacky sack is going to be really small. So I'm making sure that I'm going along where I've drawn the lines, and that my stitches are spaced evenly apart. All right, so once you have finished stitching all of your 4 pieces together, you should have about a 1-inch section where there are no stitches. You can see I have it right at that little corner because that's where you are going to fill your hacky sack or bean bag with either beans or rice or stuffing. So to close like a stitch, to finish, like either if you run out of thread or if you're at the part where you're trying to finish your hacky sack, you're gonna take the last stitch that you made and you're just going to thread the needle through it. It should be through a little bit of the fabric as well. You kind of want to loop it 2 or 3 times just to make sure that the thread isn't going to come undone. So I'm literally just like looping my thread through the last stitch that I made. It doesn't really matter which side you do this on. You just need to at least thread it like 2 times. And then to close off the stitch, all I'm doing is I'm just knotting like the, what's it called? Sorry, knotting the thread together basically. So I'm going to show you this in person, but I'm just like looping it over my finger and then pulling the needle through to create a knot. You want to make sure that the knot is close to like the very bottom of the thread. And then I'm just cutting off the excess thread. So now I have like about a 1-inch opening. So you don't want your stitches to show. This was the inside that was facing us when we were stitching our hacky sack. So now you can take your fingers very gently because you don't want to pop a stitch. You're going to reverse or like pull the fabric so it's right side out now. So this should be the correct side of the fabric that will be showing. So ideally, if your stitches were clean, they were evenly spaced and you tugged so that they were kind of tight, you shouldn't see any of the stitches. If you do, it's okay. Mine is not perfect either. You can't really see it in this video, but mine is definitely not perfect. You can see a couple of stitches. And then either using a funnel or, I realized that this funnel was a little too big. So you can use like paper. You are going to fill your hacky sack or bean bag. I chose rice because I like it to be kind of heavy and kind of squishy. But if you wanted to make it lighter, you could fill it with stuffing. If you also have any little scraps of fabric, like really small scraps, you could use that to stuff it as well. I spilled my rice a couple times, but I'm just filling the bean bag. You do not want to fill it all the way to the top, otherwise you won't be able to pinch it closed and stitch it. So you do need like a little bit of space at the top that's not like super stuffed. I decided that mine wasn't filled enough, so I added like a little bit more. So the very opening of the fabric, you're gonna see that's kind of like the edge where you cut it. So you kind of need to tuck it in like that 1/4 inch in so that you're not at the very edge of the fabric. So you need to fold it and tuck it into the hole and then pin it so that you can start doing a whip stitch. So I messed up on mine a couple of times. I didn't have my needle like threaded correctly. Like I didn't have it knotted at the bottom. So remember, when you're threading a needle, you need to have a knot towards the end of the thread. I forgot to do it the first time I started trying to close the hacky sack. So I'm just creating a little knot towards the bottom. You can see in this video I do it a couple of times, but if you pull on your needle and thread too hard, even though you have a knot at the end, it can actually pull through the fabric. So I did that like a couple times, and I just needed to be more gentle when I was tugging. So when you are stitching, you need to make sure that you're not pulling like super, super hard. Otherwise, it will just go straight through the fabric. You can see I did it right there. So I had to do it a couple of times. But essentially, to close, all you're doing is you're just whip stitching the last little 1-inch section closed. I'll go over a running stitch with you guys. It's a little bit different. Personally, I think the whip stitch helps keep the fabric together better. There's less of a chance of it coming undone. But if the whip stitch, you don't like how you can see like the thread as much, you could also do a running stitch to close it. You need to make sure when you're closing your hacky sack that you have that 1/4 inch like tucked inside so it matches with, the 1/4 inch of the fabric that was on the inside of the hacky sack. So I'm fixing my knot on my thread, and then all I'm doing to finish this hacky sack is just closing that 1-inch hole. If you guys have questions or you need me to show you again, I'm always available to do that. I don't mind showing you in person if this is confusing or, this video doesn't really make sense. So remember, once you pass the pin in the fabric with your stitches, you can take it out. I just have it pinned closed because you want that little 1/4 inch like flipped inwards. So the pin helps keep that tucked in. But if your little like hole to stuff is smaller, you may not need the pin. I just needed it because it was kind of big. But that's basically it. That's how you do a hacky sack. And if you have spare fabric, like an old t-shirt, this is pretty easy to make at home, so you could make a couple of these.